we have a very, very cool class today because we have two guests visiting who, and both of them, I'm just really, they happen to be in town on the same day, and I'm really, really happy that they're here. Two heavy hitters in their respective fields, and two people who really just have a lot to say about two different things. And listen, first off, Jennifer, right? Jennifer, Dr. Bratter. When I first met Dr. Bratter, she was Jennifer Bratter, and that was almost 1/4 of a century ago. Indeed. Welcome back to Social 119.
Thank you.
So Jennifer, and this is important, and one of the things I want you to be thinking about today is these are two people just like most of you, one who went into the academy, the other who went into business, and I want you to see some things in yourself. But anyway, Jennifer, it's essentially the same class that was happening back a 1/4 century ago.
Yes. Can we say that? A 1/4 of a century ago, right?
Oh, hang on. Almost a 1/4 of a century.
We've got like 2 years. Yeah.
So Jennifer went on to get her master's degree, then her PhD, and is now an associate professor at Rice University. Is that like the Harvard of the South or something?
That's what they say.
That's what they
yes.
say. Jennifer,
yes, it is.
Jennifer's a real sociologist, so has a real job, does real research, and is really a heavy hitter in the field of mixed race issues and race issues.
Okay. Yes.
Totally.
I am.
Total heavy hitter.
Yeah.
And she would be considered an expert in the area of mixed race. Don't say you're not. I know she is. Okay?
I am.
And I'm not an expert in anything, although
I know.
I did come in first place in a joint rolling contest once, so
yeah.
It was actually second place, but the first place person cheated, so I won. Anyway, welcome.
Thank you.
And I'm going to ask you. I know we only have you for until 1/4 after, and the most obvious question for you is when we talk about mixed race, what are we talking about? Mm-hmm. But I'm not going to ask you that because that might lead you into your academic mind. So I'm going to ask you a different one. From everything you know, but first off, how many of you are mixed race? Identify as mixed race? Raise your hands.
Wow.
Could I get 3 of you really fast to come sit on the table up here? Maybe 1. Bro, how about you? And how about in the back? With the hair. Yeah, that's you. With the hair. You knew who I was talking about, right?
Awesome.
So can you...
Hi. Nice to meet you.
What's your name?
Trey.
Trey? Dude, just have a seat on the table. And what's your name?
You have a name too?
Lexi.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for coming up.
Yeah, bro.
I know it was...
All right, man. What's your name? Simone. Bro, you coming up too?
Hi, Simone.
What's
nice
that?
To meet
no,
you.
Yeah, come up too, Doug. Yeah.
And you are? Brett? Nice to meet you, Brett.
Okay, so just have a seat. At a couple points we'll ask you a couple questions. There's a microphone. But okay, so Jennifer, you ready?
Yes.
From everything you know about being mixed race and standing in 2 worlds.
Okay.
Being in 2 worlds. What would you like to tell society about how to more constructively relate to mixed race people? Good luck with that one.
Okay, so society, if it was like a thing I could talk to.
This people right here.
Okay.
Here's society.
Hi, society. Okay. That sucks, man. All right, so where I like to begin thinking about when I think about what I would say to someone is, what is it that we take for granted when we think about our race, identity, and our families? And some of those things are like, everybody looks the same. My parents look similarly to me. I identify in a way that other people can see and recognize. And it's not really a deal for me to even think about those issues. For someone for whom that's not the case, highlighting that can be an issue. It couldn't be just uncomfortable. It may be an opportunity to talk, but it is an issue. And so when we were talking about this whole experience, I was thinking about kind of a story that helped me kind of crystallize that. So I'm mixed race, and I have 2 children, and I was in a bookstore, and I was going to buy a storybook, and I found one that was called The Hello Goodbye Window, and it featured this black female and white male couple with a child. And it's about the child going to grandma's house, and grandma actually happened to be African American, and grandpa happened to be white too. And I was like, I don't know how that works out, but fine. And so it's just about her going to grandpa's house. And it's this really sweet story, and I thought, oh, this would be neat because I never had that kind of story growing up. So I started reading this to my son, and I found myself tearing up. You know, I found myself just kind of getting emotionally overwhelmed and trying to quiet it because I'm trying to get to the story and have him enjoy it. But I'm thinking to myself, why is this hitting me like this? And the reason is because I'd never seen a family that looked like mine in a book. And it never even occurred to me that that mattered until that moment. And I was, adult. I was a grown-up. This wasn't a case of me trying to find my place in the world when I'm in my teens, early 20s. Like, I was grown. I had a mortgage and children and, job, et cetera. And I'm sitting there reading a storybook, and it's just hitting me like a ton of bricks that this mattered. And so what I would tell society is the things that we take for granted can be the things that are hardest for folks who can't take those for granted. And standing in 2 worlds is a really, really hard metaphor for me, because the reason why it's an issue is because those are 2 worlds. So why did it hit me like that? Well, because I never saw families like that. And when I think about why don't I see families like that, I think about, well, is it because whites or blacks or racial groups don't like each other, whatever? No. We live in a segregated world. And when you're mixed race, you're on the front lines of that in many, many ways. And so when race starts to matter, to me, in these moments of seeing the exception exposed, like, oh, this is my family and I've never seen it before, I realize, wow, this is the world we live in. And so I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but what I would tell society is, like, this stuff, this sort of segregation that makes this the exception is hard for everyone in many, many ways. But for individuals for whom it's hard in a very personal way, because you don't see yourself reflected in the way we generally have been used to seeing ourselves reflected. I see people who look like me. I see families that look like mine. That can be heavy. That can be a difficult experience to manage.
Okay, lovely.
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're going to be asking you some questions as we go. You can come right here.
I should stand there? Okay.
Dude, take center stage, man.
Okay.
This is your cathedral right
Oh, my
now.
God.
Okay, here's
Thank
my
you.
next one. Thanks
Okay.
for that. That's a really cool answer, by the way.
Okay. Thank you.
So what tips do you have for mixed race people, as in these folks right here, about how to live in the world with a greater sense of well-being? Just to increase their well-being from everything you know about the literature, and you're studying this, and
Okay, so first thing, I certainly wouldn't assume that you don't have good well-being. You seem like really together people, so I would never want to just walk in and say, look, I know you have problems. I mean, yeah, I know, right? You seem together, but you got problems. Like, I wouldn't want to walk into anyone's world and assume that because of your background, life's hard. But I would say that from what I know in the literature, the hard part of thinking about mixed race issues is that we don't have a consistent way to even define it. So we don't even know what we're talking about. When we think about race mixture, generally speaking, folks bring to mind like a mixed race family and a child. But there are people who have race mixture in their family that they're like, oh my goodness, I want to reach back into that ancestry and I want to know more about it. or folks for whom they're very comfortable with themselves. They've lived in both worlds, or those worlds are really integrated in their lives, and they feel very comfortable with that. And so the notion that this is a hard experience, I think, is itself a construction. And so the tips I would have for folks is first know where you are on that spectrum, to what degree is this an issue for you, and how much it matters. But also know that the reason why it's an issue has nothing to do with you as an individual. And I remember when I was in this class, and we actually had a discussion about mixed race issues, and I don't think I told you this, Sam, but I was really uncomfortable, because I was like, why is he making a deal about this? I don't want to talk about that. I was cool. I studied, and I was like, oh, this is such an engaging class. Thank you. You're so great. I was like, that was sucked. Because I wasn't ready to think about it. And I think the reason why I wasn't ready to think about it is because it made me feel different. It made me feel unique in a way I wasn't ready to feel. And I wouldn't want to push anyone to say, embrace something that you're not ready to embrace. But know that if there's a feeling of difference, that feeling has nothing to do with the person and has everything to do with the stuff that makes mixture seem new and strange and different. People have been mixing since there have been people. And we know this historically, we know it currently, but we always treat this issue like it's new. Like, wow, you're this and that's you, unique and different. It's not unique and different. So one tip is to know that to whatever degree this is an uncomfortable experience, that discomfort has nothing to do with you, the person, but a lot to do with the assumptions folks bring to the table. And then the other thing would be to think about how much in common you have with so many other folks who are wrestling with the same issues in different ways. So when I was growing up, I found myself feeling a strong kinship with folks who just felt like, you know, back then we were thinking about race authenticity a lot. So like, are you black enough was like the big question. And I don't know if that's still a deal today, but I had a lot of friends who had that kind of conversation. So I found myself connecting with people who felt different in a lot of different ways. And that made us kind of like a family. So I would also encourage folks for whom this is uncomfortable is to just connect with people who share that discomfort, but could be experiencing it in a range of ways. So it doesn't have to just be about race mixture. It could be about anything. But it's always important to find connections in folks. Because in the literature, the one thing that keeps bubbling up is this notion that racially mixed folks tend to be really isolated. That's the thing that really is kind of bubbles up as a concern. And I think that makes sense in a world that race matters so much. But if you find connections with folks, that can make a big difference.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, very cool. I want to go to the question of, is it black enough? I have one more question for you, and then we're going to go to our panelists. So, what are some of the coolest things about being mixed race to you, Dr. Bratter?
But I'm not cool, Sam. Okay.
So
this is, I just want to say, seeing myself on here is really weird, and I'm having a hard time not doing this, but I know that that's not, okay. That's not the way you do this.
If
All
you
right.
spin really fast, you'll see yourself looking.
I know. I'm going to wait, see if I can catch myself when I'm not looking. All right. So the coolest thing, so have you talked about essentialism in this class?
No.
Okay. So
we don't talk about anything that's
damn. Okay.
4 syllables or more. Yeah.
Essentialism. Okay. So there's this okay, so I won't talk about essentialism. I'm really uncomfortable with that question because I have a hard time thinking about what is the coolest thing.
How about
like
just for you? What's been the coolest thing for you about being mixed race?
Well, I really like messing with people. I'm a nice person, but I love messing with people. So I feel like as a mixed race person, I get to be under various racial radars and just, so I've been perceived as a variety of things, and I've allowed people to believe that just because it's funny. it's not funny to them, but it was to me. That's been cool.
Wait, so for example, can you give us, what are you perceive? Can you come stand right here and look right into this mic so everyone can see your face?
I'm not going to do that.
All right, well, we'll just get a close up then. She's going to stay right here. What have you been perceived to be?
Nothing. I was just kidding. So let's see. I get a Dominican, Brazilian. Over the phone, I've been called white a few times. I mean, not called, because no one who's white says, "Hey, white person, it's cool to be white," right? But the person thought I was white, and that was really fun. Let's see, other races that I've been. I think most of what I've encountered that's been along those lines are people who are trying to guess. And so the questions of, well, where are you from? Because you got to be from someplace. And I always imagine that that person thinks that there's like this land of people who look like me, and it's an island off the coast of someplace, and this is where I'm from. I'm like, well, I'm from the United States. Really? But where are you from? Like, your parents must be from somewhere. I'm like, my mother's from Chicago, my dad's from St. Paul, and to me, I'm like, okay, that's got to tick you up, Chicago, South Side, St. Paul. There's no South Side, it's very white. But basically allowing them to try to unravel something that's obviously bothering them.
So given your work as a sociologist, that for you, that's fun to be able to.
Oh, yeah, it's a good time. I like watching people try to figure out my kids. I have my older son, I think physically resembles me a lot more, but my younger son is very, very fair-skinned. And a lot of people that we would interact with were just like, why is he so white? He's so cute. But really white, though. And it's one of those things that as a parent, I want to like kick someone in the face because I don't like my kids being racialized. Yeah. And as when you guys become parents, you won't like people racializing your children. You may even figure out what that means. In this class, no, okay. So, but it also bothers me that we read whiteness in this very kind of constrained way. So how could I have a child who looks that fair? And I'm like, my dad's white. All of his family's white, My husband's Mexican-American. His father, very fair-skinned man. Like, it can happen, and it happens all the time. And so that, I think, it doesn't bother me in a like, oh, my God, I'm so bothered. But it's troublesome that folks care about that kind of stuff and feel comfortable sharing it, There are a lot of other things that are very distinctive about folks that people generally don't talk about, and race is not one of those things. So I've been at parties and someone's like, so where are you from? You're lovely. Please unpack this for me. And I'm like, I know I don't like you. So this is going to be a short chat. But at any rate, I think it's really about challenging folks' assumptions and exposing them. Okay.
How about, can we hit that question first? Who would like to respond? What's the coolest thing about being mixed race? What's your background? Like, where are you from, actually? So, yeah, maybe you could.
All right, so my dad is from Mexico, and my mom, she's Irish, so from Newfoundland. So,
excellent.
Yeah.
So what's the coolest thing about being you?
It's I kind of like messing with people, too. Just like the reactions that you get. Some of the time, it's negative, sometimes it's positive, or just, I don't know, like, the first encounter I had, a woman came up to my mother, because my mother's white and I don't look entirely white. They said, what adoption agency did you get them from?
Wow.
And my mother, being as witty as she was, she said, oh, it's this really nice place called my womb. So.
Nicely handled, Mom.
Yeah.
Wow.
Cool.
How did you feel when that happened?
I mean, I was fairly young, so I was a little confused by it, or like why it mattered, but I didn't really think much of it until I was older.
Cool. And what's your name again?
Lexi.
Lexi. How about somebody else? And who else would want to respond?
I know everyone wants to. There you thank you.
Oh, is it on? Okay, never mind. Wait, do you want me to say my race?
Yeah, what's your name first?
Okay, I'm Simone. My mom is Vietnamese and my dad is black. I guess the coolest thing is like that awe factor. Like people are like, oh, you must be foreign. Then I'm like, no, I'm from Washington State. Like, I'm not
So
foreign
disappointed.
at all. Yeah.
Washington State.
I know. And then like how you were saying how you can like secretly identify with like other groups. Like a lot of people think that I'm Spanish, and like I hang around like a lot of Spanish people, so I feel like a part of them. But
There you go.
Hi, excuse me. I'm Brett, and I'm black and white. My mother's white, mostly Italian, and my biological father is black. And my stepdad is Italian, so my family was mostly white growing up, and in Pittsburgh, Baltimore area.
Awesome. So what's cool about being you?
I like being ethnically ambiguous, as I like to call it, where people can't guess what you are, and getting to mess with people's fun. So
Nice.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm going to go with another question, and then maybe you can respond, and you can respond to this one. And this goes back to you, and then we'll bounce it off of them. So Jennifer, my experience of mixed race people, when one person is in this culture, when one person is white, very often the person who's mixed race tends to come to, maybe, I don't know, decide, they end up identifying more often than not with the part of them that is more minoritized, not majoritized. So
I don't think those are words, Sam.
all right, so Brett, so Brett would end up identifying, even if Brett looked more white,
Right.
what I see again and again is that people will still tend to identify with the part of them that is not white.
So are you asking if
I'm
that's...
asking you, can you talk about, how that is? How is it that not only does Barack Obama tend to identify as black
Right.
when he's half white, but the fact that we all see him as black, but he identifies that way. How is it that he comes to identify that way, and most people tend to do that?
So that's a really salient, like persisting, ongoing question for folks who study this. And so I think there's kind of two answers. I think the first one is we're basically seeing kind of the way race is organized in the United States. So in the United States, early history, there were, Europeans are arriving, they're bringing indentured servants, some of them are European, but there were some Africans too who were initially indentured servants, and there were intermingling happening, and babies were arriving, and the powers that be were very, very concerned about how those children's identities might unsettle a kind of an emerging power structure around being European. So what began was basically a norm around identifying half-white children with that minority parent to build that minority population, but also to protect whiteness. That's essentially kind of the historical kind of background to that. But what it evolved to 400, 500 years later, about 500 years later, is a persisting way that race impacts day-to-day experiences. And so if you're perceived as non-white, and there's something about the way race is organized that we can see non-whiteness very clearly, and we can see whiteness. Like basically, if there's any part of you that unsettles or is something different than white, you're already put in the person's sort of vision as a non-white person, that's going to impact how you're treated. And those treatment, that day-to-day experience, is what builds identity. So who I think I am has a lot to do with how people treat me, how I feel like they see me, and essentially when we talk about why racially mixed folks, particularly folks of partial white and partial black ancestry tend to identify as African American, it's generally a reflection of that exposure and that treatment. And it's not just about whites interacting with you and treating you with bias. It's also about people of African American descent saying, hey, you're one of us. And there's this notion, I don't know if anyone's heard of the one drop rule. Is that still a thing? No? Really? It's not a thing. Okay, well, it used to be a thing. But basically, it was a cultural norm that said the black population is made up of anyone who has any African ancestry at all. And I mean 1/32nd, like one great-grandparent is African American, everybody else is white, that person is black. That's essentially how law defined race. And after laws stopped caring about race in a very explicit way, those cultural conventions became norms. So ultimately, it's about how that identity is a reflection of the way you're treated on the day-to-day. So that's one answer. I think the other answer has to do with what feels more right to the person. So I'll give you an example. I was flying here to State College, and I was in my seat, and this woman walked by. She's an African American woman with really short hair, and I told her, your hair is beautiful. And she was saying, thank you, and we had this really great exchange about hair. And I never feel more black than when I talk about hair. So I'm like, I got my hair did. Hair, I know my hair takes so long. How about your hair? Well, I did this. And so it's like this wonderful experience of talking about hair. And that is a part of identity too. And it's about finding those moments of validation and rolling with it. So I identify as a mixed race person, but I also very strongly identify as a black person, in part because of those types of experiences. So it's some of it's push, but a lot of it's about being embraced, but it's also about kind of how I feel like I'm viewed by other people.
Yeah, very cool. Okay. Bro, on the left. My left. Can you pass him the mic? How about you? First off, what's your name, background?
I'm Trey. My dad's black and my mom's white.
So how do you identify?
Black, mostly.
Uh-huh. When do you identify as white?
Never.
Yeah? Wait, your mom's white?
Yeah.
How's your mom feel about that?
I feel like my dad always told me, like, never be under the illusion of inclusion. Like, you're never going to be fully accepted into the white community, so as a half black, half white, I'll never fully be accepted as a white person, so I would never identify as one.
Uh-huh. And when you, Jennifer, I'm going to ask one more question and
Okay.
then you take over. When you're with your mom and your mom's family, do you, how about in those moments when you're just with your mom?
Well, when I'm just with my family, I'm pretty comfortable. I know they all accept me as their grandson, son, brother, sister.
Mm-hmm. Jennifer?
Can I ask a follow-up? So do you think your mom would like you to identify as white? Or have you talked about it?
No, we've never really talked about it, but I don't think she would want me to. Like, I don't know.
Okay, and I ask because I've had this conversation with my dad, and he just accepted just at the foundation, like, there is no way that you could ever be accepted, like the illusion of inclusion is a wonderful way to think about that. And so I sort of looked at him like, you're white, and I'm your kid, and I don't identify in the same category as you. I'm trying to imagine, like, that just seems like it would bother me as a parent that my kid is not identifying the same way. And when I talked to him about it, he basically shared with me that he knew that the world can be a very racist place, and that's where that need for identifying came from. So I think that a part of, kind of going back to your first question about, like, what's unique about being a mixed race person, I think one of the things that emerges is a degree of race consciousness amongst families who have mixed race children, and a exceeding level of race consciousness among whites who are in multiracial families. So folks who have mixed race backgrounds where one parent is white generally have a far greater sense of race and how it operates than most other white people. And folks who have parents or families where one person is black and someone isn't, generally have a sense of what black means in society. And that's not something you find in every family where those folks aren't present. So, I really appreciate you sharing that. I think certainly I can't imagine families who sit around saying, well, you're white. Well, I know. And let's talk about race all day because it's Thanksgiving. Like, nobody does that. But it becomes a component of how these conversations that we have can and can't do the work that we want them to do. So I sometimes I had to seek that conversation out with my dad, but he wasn't just going to have it with me. I had to ask him. And I asked him after I was graduated from college, had your class, had the arsenal. I was ready to go. It's like Sam said, blah, blah, blah. And he
So
said, who
listen,
is this man?
So how about your?
I want to find him.
So it's your youngest one who's really light skinned.
Yes.
So it's kind of a conversation you'll have with him in a way, right? Like,
Yeah.
does he see you as his mother?
Yeah. I'm mom. Are you kidding me?
So
Yes.
Exactly. So how it's really interesting, right? How these go back and forth.
It is, I think, what's interesting, and so of course he sees me as his mother.
Yeah.
I mean, it's I could share so many stories, but you're recording this.
Yeah.
So yes, he does. And my oldest son does too, but I think what's interesting, and you might think about this as people who were formerly very young people, race is hard to talk about. Race is really hard to talk about when you're a young person because everything's very concrete. And, for my older son, he had a lot of questions. And we had an ongoing conversation. He's like, okay, well, you say you're black, but you look like this, and so-and-so is this, and what is going on? And I think I'm this. I'm like, well, you're kind of that, but you're historically. Let's talk about segregation since you're 5. I'm a sociologist. This is what we do. But we had that conversation. I felt more comfortable because I saw him as someone who was physically marked as like, you're going to grow up in a world where people are going to see you this way. My youngest son has a sense of difference, but has not been presented with race in as explicit of a way. And so it's harder to sort of begin that conversation unless I want to sit down and say, okay, slavery, what do you think?
Yep.
He's like,
Yep.
bad, right? Yes, bad. And then we move on.
So with your youngest son, it's just his light skin just adds another dimension to the conversation, which is cool, right? I mean, it's just gonna add that.
I would say one last thing, though,
Yep.
is, and I think I'm probably more sensitive to this, and I really appreciate the story that you shared. We're very, when we introduce him to people or when we're around, we're very keen on which families we feel comfortable with our kids socializing. And in part, what we're looking for is, do we feel comfortable that these families are going to be accepting, et cetera, of whatever difference that we feel is happening in our household? So I don't know how he will grow up, but I think we've done a lot of work to craft environments where we think he and his brother can feel comfortable.
Final couple comments from you all. Do either of the three of you have a story about choice, the ways in which you make choices about how you talk about it and what you do? We just have a couple minutes left.
So for me, like if I needed to choose, if you gave me an SAT, I would say that I am Hispanic. But if you were to like ask me and like start up a conversation, I wouldn't identify, because there is no way to identify. Like you just say like this is what I am. So and like even in high school there was cliques. So you had the Hispanic girls, which I was friends with, but I wasn't part of the group. But I also wasn't part of the white group either. So.
And how about, do you hang out with Vietnamese? I mean, do you have Vietnamese friends, and where are you in that?
I mean, I have like the whole like full spectrum of like friends and like races, so I've never like felt the need to have to identify with like black, like choosing black or being like Asian. Because even when I was younger and like they would be like, okay, you have to choose like one option, I would just put other, just because I was raised to like be really proud of being both races. So
So you didn't find yourself really struggling with the choice as much?
no.
Yeah, Brett, how about you?
It was hard to kind of figure that out. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hold the mic close.
Because I didn't have a black male figure growing up, so all I had was my mom's white family and my stepdad's white family. So I had to find that on my own. So for a long time, I would only say that I was black and white, and I was very adamant about black and Italian. But you know, I guess as you get older, I lived in a lot of white communities too, in different parts of the country. So it wasn't until I really moved to Baltimore and really got to be around a lot more, you know, black people that, you know, you kind of, and I always did research, so there's always something there, but it was always, there was never any actual connection. So, but now I feel confident to say that I am a mixed black man, yeah. So
Yeah.
everybody has their own way of finding it, though.
But even right there, you said, I'm comfortable saying I'm a mixed black man, not mixed white man. You see what I mean? That's that thing, that essentialism thing that kind of happens. But cool, very cool. Thanks, y'all. Listen, we are, you got the final 2 minutes, man. Give us,
I'm supposed to talk?
yeah, dude.
Oh, I thought you had a question.
Give us your final 2 minutes of wisdom.
Oh, boy. Okay. Well, what a horrible setup. So wisdom happened to have nothing. So one thing that occurred to me, actually, when you were talking, that makes mixed race people interesting, is also being the people of color who have experiences that are really distinctive from almost any community that they're coming from.
Yeah.
So a lot of folks who are mixed race backgrounds grow up in like predominantly white communities, and that race experience is very different for someone who grows up in predominantly Latino or Black or Asian communities. And so a big part of the journey is confronting that experience of, oh, not only am I of color and not like them, but I'm also kind of like you, but not yet because I don't know you yet, you know, and sort of interacting across communities. And so there's that, but I think the other thing I wanted to end on, because I was reflecting what would have been a better answer to some of those questions that Sam was asking me. One moment where I felt like being mixed race was super duper cool was when I went to Hawaii. And is anyone here from Hawaii? I'm sure there's a hand raised. Good for you, person, if you're out there, because there's a lot of you. Hawaii is the mecca of race mixture. Like, everybody there is mixed. And that was the only time when people asking me what my background was really cool, because everyone's got that. And it felt different. I didn't even have to know the history, but I could just tell from the way someone was talking to me that they were excited and interested because they had a story to share too. And so one of the things I think that I would end on is that a lot of what we experience about race has to do with how society defines stuff, but also how we live those things in our local communities and environments. And those things can vary from place to place. Your experience in Baltimore is going to be very different from someone going to Alabama versus someone going to LA versus someone going to Wyoming. And that is a big part of the story. And because mixed race people are everywhere, what mixed race looks like is going to vary just as much. So I think that's what I got.
Dude, you killed it. All right, thank you. And thank you, y'all. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Yeah, very good. Listen, really, thanks for coming. Honestly, it's lovely having you here.
Yeah, no worries.
And I know you have a dinner tonight. I do have a dinner. You can stay for a bit. You can leave. You can do whatever you need to do. Okay. And I will see you tomorrow. All right. Thanks. Seriously, I'll hug you. All right. All right. gosh. Okay. Yeah, you can have a seat. Thank you. Okay, y'all. Yo, very cool. So those of you who are, just mixed, who know people who are mixed, who are connected, just remember the ideas and the conversations and so on. Okay. We have another guest, another heavy hitter, and I mentioned this guy the other day. This is the man right here. When you talk about the man, this guy is. No, you won't. There you are. This is the man. Okay, he is former CEO of top 10 Fortune 10 corporation, president of Fortune 10 corporation, CEO of a Fortune 30 corporation, is an advisor to business executives around the world, is a leading, and the author of Be Chief. Look at that photo right there, man. Look at that photo. Dude, that's scary, right? I told him he can't wear a suit like that to class today. And anyway, I'm going to say, before I get the applause, I want to say something else here. At the same time, let me say something else about this guy. Rick Miller grew up working class, moved around a lot. His father lost a series of manufacturing jobs. Was really difficult. He essentially was raised in a single-parent home because his mother was in and out of mental institutions as a kid. Really worked hard, was on his own from a really young age, had to put himself through school, did so as an RA and taking jobs and saving money, and coming out of college, taking these sales jobs that were really difficult and really raising himself up. And then once he got the opportunities, took the opportunities, did some really cool things. In particular, regarding women, was one of the first people, and it was AT&T, right, where you realized there were no women in these leadership positions and being able to move up. So started a program to really bring women into leadership positions. And there are a long list of other things that I could say about you, that you were not born with a silver spoon in your mouth, but you really did it, my friend. Class, Rick Miller, right? So here's the thing. Rick has been to 119 before. Welcome back.
That mean it is working now? Yes?
It is.
Outstanding. Nice to be back.
It's good to have you back.
Nice to be back.
Really good to have you back. Let me tell you why Rick's here. For a lot of reasons he's here, but let me tell you, I'm not going to let it out. I'm not going to go there. I'm just going to start with your first question. And the first question, by the way, is
every class like an improv? He gets up and he decides, what do I want? No, I don't want to do that, right?
Yeah.
You're supposed to do some planning, Sam.
No.
Honest to goodness.
It isn't. This is first questions from
You've
Lori.
never been in business, have you?
No. Listen, this guy.
Is it that obvious?
Listen, man. Y'all, right? Those of you who want to be at the top someday, you get to the top. I've met a lot of people at the top, and not only in the U.S., but in other parts of the world, and every one of them is wired like this guy. And I mean, you don't get to the top if you are not wired. And so I just want to, you really need to see the energy. But listen, Lori's question is the first one.
Lori's question.
Yep.
At least
Tell
we're
us
getting
something.
quality. At least we're getting quality to start.
You are going to get a good question. Tell us something that nobody ever tells us about rising up the ladder in corporate America and getting to the top, my friend. All we ever hear is about living the dream, living the dream. Tell us something about the nightmare.
Well, you just asked two questions. Do you want me to tell you about the nightmare, or do you want me to tell you something that, which do you want?
Tell us.
I'll go where you want to go, but you
give
have
us
to
the
be
nightmare
clear.
one.
See, in business we learn that clarity is very important.
With clarity
Let's be
comes
clear.
profit. Tell us about the nightmare.
The nightmare. Well, I've been fired once, and I quit one of the biggest jobs that I ever had, both because of values. And here's a bit of the nightmare. It's hard to find a company, big or small, that doesn't somehow put on the wall or a wallet insert or on some screen their list of values. They always look the same. Integrity, teamwork, innovation, right? Commitment to the community, customers first. I mean, they all look the same. But the nightmare is when you find yourself in an organization where those are the words that are on the wall, but they're not practiced every day in the company. And there's so many organizations out there, unfortunately, many of them are failing, not surprisingly, where what they say and what they do are disconnected. And as you make a life decision for you and your family about where am I going to try to make a livelihood, to raise my kids and the money it takes to send them to college and give them a chance, you're making these decisions based on what people are telling you. You'll do your homework in any organization, but the nightmare, one nightmare, and I know there's a lot of questions, but one nightmare is when you find yourself in a situation where, despite all the due diligence, all the work you've done to talk to people, you're not going to make that move in a casual way. So you're going to do your homework. They're doing their homework on you. You need to do your homework on them. And the nightmare is where, despite your best efforts, you find yourself in a place that lacks integrity.
And that's
a nightmare.
That starts with the very first job out of college.
That's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. Particularly if you are, and I hope for all of you, we'll talk about this later on, you know where you stand, what's important to you, what defines you, and some element of integrity has got to be on your list. And if you find yourself in a situation where you're consistently working with people who just don't have it, that's a nightmare.
And again, that starts with the first job out of college.
Absolutely.
And so what would you say to people as they're looking for their first job out of college with this in mind?
Well, and again, it's a little different. A little different because the expectation that you all have for that first job is probably measured in months, right? The first company I started with out of school, I was with for 15 years. That's the way it was done back then, right? So I would say that while the risk profile is a little bit different, it's still a fair question, but I wanted to draw that.
Yep.
There's so many places for you to apply your skills, and some number of you are entrepreneurs and will say, I never want to work for anybody else. God bless. And many of you will say, you know what, I want to get there, but first I probably need some skills that maybe somebody else could teach me. Not a bad idea. So you'll end up in a small, medium, or a large organization. It doesn't matter. If you're working in a large organization. By the way, just a quick aside, large organizations are getting a little bit of a hit these days, right? I don't want to work for the corporation, right? Who wants to work for the man or the woman, right? I would just offer, just as an aside, be careful with that, because sometimes when you come out, you want skills, you want experiences, you want to meet a bunch of great people and learn. Some of the larger organizations still can be great places for you to grow, realizing you probably won't be there for 15 years. So just put that aside. That's a little bit of a commercial, because I find many times people say, well, I want to work for myself, right? Right out of school, I want to work for myself. I'm going to become the next blah, 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 blah. And when I get a chance to work with an awful lot of great students on the left coast, I hear that all the time, close to Silicon Valley. If I'm not starting by the way, if I'm a sophomore and I don't have my plan for my first billion, I'm behind. So expectations may need to be monitored a little bit. But I just offer that. Go back to the question.
No, listen. I'm going to go to a different direction. That was a very
Okay.
cool answer. As Jeff changes your microphone. So you
Be
know a
careful
little
back
bit
there.
about Social 119 and
I don't know this guy.
and what we do here, and what this class is about, the issues we're addressing, and so on and so forth, right? So what are some lessons that you probably got as a student in taking a class like this, or would have gotten by taking this class, and that you needed in your tool pouch every day in your work life, in the corporation? At the top, at the top levels. What are some of the lessons that you certainly would have gotten in this class that you used every day about diversity and race and getting along and engaging?
Yeah, I will
and so
tell
on?
you that the classes that I enjoyed the most were like this one. But frankly, it's because it reinforced lessons that I learned at home. Okay? Sam mentioned the gift of life that I have with my mom and dad. Mom has been in a mental institution for most of her life, and thankfully she's still with us, but physically, maybe not mentally. Dad's done a wonderful job with me and my two younger brothers. But the classes that I enjoyed reinforced what Dad taught me. Dad was a human resource exec, okay? Back in the day, he was called a personnel guy, then a human resources guy. So when I grew up at the kitchen table, I heard stories about grievances and compensation and fair treatment of people and good communication. Now, since I've got the mic, I get to brag about my dad. I love doing this. My dad was a human resource leader, listen, in the only non-union machine tool shop in central Massachusetts. Now, I'm not anti-union, right? But my point is, in 27 years at the Heald Machine Company, there was never even a union vote. Now, what does that mean? It means that management and the employee base had such a good relationship. They talked to each other. When there was an issue, they worked it out, right? Nobody got a pass, by the way, on high expectations. I mean, machine tools in the 50s and 60s when I grew up, machine tools were really under attack by the Japanese market, by the Japanese manufacturers. So it was a tough market. So nobody gave anybody a pass on profitability or some of the tough metrics that you're running a business. But somehow, they never needed a union. So you talk about the classes that I took. The class is sociology. I have a psych minor, okay? Unheard of at Bentley University. I was the first one to get a psychology minor at a business school at Bentley University. It used to be Bentley College back in the day. But it was because I believe strongly in the fact that all solutions come from people. Any business that's going to be successful is because it takes care of its people. I don't care what the product is. I don't care what the good or service is. I don't care what your competitive landscape is. I don't care about any of that, right? The fact is, this class, Social 119 and many like it, teach an appreciation for the diversity, the wonder of people, and the wonderful opportunity we have to harmonize. I think about an orchestra, the many different instruments that are out there, the wonder of a great conductor, right? And we can all be conductors as we play in our orchestra, is how to harmonize all that to make wonderful melodies. And that's what this class is about, and that's what I think success in business is about.
So when you see businesses that are not addressing these issues, and you see leaders, because you work with lots of leaders all over the country who are not thinking about these issues, and instead it's just, let's get right to the numbers, accounting and the numbers and so on and so forth, right? And not thinking about this level of work. What happens with them? Can you say something about that?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of great surveys, and actually a CEO survey was just done, and it's run last 15 years. The Conference Board runs a survey of all the top CEOs in the world. Say, what are you worried about? What's keeping you up at night? And interestingly, before this year, outside the U.S., every other region of the world, the top concern of CEOs was human capital. Financial capital, human capital, right? Business has these funny words to say about people. We're talking about people. Human capital, okay. Human capital was number one in every region of the world other than the U.S. that was customer service until this year. Now human capital is the number one issue on every CEO's mind.
So tell me what that means. So keeping people up at night. What are you really saying?
What keeps people up at night is, how do I retain talent? How do I grow talent, right? How do I get the most out of talent? And here's where, Sam, it's critical that the link was made, because people think human capital, it's the soft stuff, right? It's the touchy-feely, it's the emotions. Until a study was done about what is the cost of having an employee group that's not fully engaged. So you guys show up at work and you're not giving your best, right? I'll give you a B+ at work, not the A that I need from you if I'm your employer. The cost to the U.S. business, right, of lack of total engagement last year, $500 billion. $500 billion. The cost to U.S. business of not having their employee, their human capital, all in. Like, they show up in the morning, whoa, you got to tell me it's attached. Now give me the other one. Take it out. Take it out. Take it out. Thank you. There we go. So the point, right? The point is that when I can put a $500 billion number on it, share owners care, CFOs care, everybody who's financial. You said numbers, Sam. People want to talk about numbers. The fact is, CEOs always want to talk about numbers. But increasingly, instead of what are my margins, what are my expenses, they're measuring what's my level of employee engagement, right? And they're measuring it now. Across the U.S., average employee engagement for medium and large-sized companies, 30%.
Meaning that
30%, 7 out of 10 people are not fully engaged at work. That is what is keeping people up at night, and it's because it's a bottom line issue.
Man, I would say it's true in academia. It's probably true in this class. It's true in every class. Come on. Well, how about percentage
So
of
the 3 out of the 10 people that are really giving their best, please stand up.
Yeah. But everybody would stand because everybody thinks they're giving their best, right?
Okay.
So tell me, you want to hire people, okay?
I
so
do.
People, everybody wants to be where you're at. You live the dream. You're there. Not everybody, but
You can
my
believe that,
God,
Sam.
So many people do, right? I talk to students. I want to be a CEO of a company. I want to be the president of a company. I want to start my own company. I want this. I want that, right? Everybody wants that.
Okay.
And so, what is the thing in people that people like you are looking for? That people want to rise up the ladder, they want to climb the rungs of the ladder. What's the thing that people like you are looking for that's going to help them ensure that they actually can climb up that ladder?
It's a great question.
And by the way, y'all, this is the answer right here, okay? You think about this. Listen carefully.
The thing that I look for is something that we probably have to talk about in terms of its definition. But what I look for people who have power. That's what I look for. I look for powerful people. Now, the challenge in the definition is many people will define power as that's the result of getting to the company and getting blah, blah, blah. So if you're defining power as position, title, authority, money, the semblance of control, even though it's an illusion, if that is your definition of power, you're going to miss it. If, on the other hand, you'll think a little bit about what power is, and think about people who you know who are truly powerful. Think about power in terms of clarity. Do you know people that are really clear in their thinking? Do you know people who have an impact? Do you know people who have influence over you? Do you know people who have a great degree of energy? Right? Do you know people who have a strong, not arrogance, but confidence? That's what I look for. That's what I look for. And that's what many businesses are looking for. They're looking for people who are bringing that energy, that understanding of who they are, right? Because what business is most focused on is trying to create situations where you are so excited about what you're doing that you're giving that all-in engagement we talked about. That's what business leaders want. But if you don't know yourself, if you're kind of fuzzy on what works for you, and you find yourself in a position that's not a match for you, does the company win or lose? The company loses.
And
Do you win or lose? You lose.
Yeah.
So I want that clarity. I want you to know more about who you are than maybe you do now. And I believe that there are simple questions that you guys could ask yourself that could bring you along that journey. And independent of where you go, I believe you will be more powerful. And whatever choices you will make those decisions more powerfully.
But I would say that it's not just business. You know, when I'm looking for, we're recruiting for the live stream team next semester. It's that. A World in Conversation. People who I just want to kind of be with. Like it's the same thing. It's every organization. It might be the Red Cross. It might be, the local library. Everybody's looking for that same thing. When did you, and I get the sense among, I've been teaching 33 years. I get the sense that students are not much different than how I was. That I kind of thought, well, later in life I'll develop that power. I'll develop those things that I need. But I think that that's not what you would say. No, it starts right now.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are all different. I mean, one of the benefits I had, I never thought until recently that I would think about the type 1 diabetes that I've lived with for 40 years as an advantage. But I will tell you that 40 years ago, I was sitting right where you are in the back row as a student at Bentley University. And I was a pretty good student, and I didn't try real hard until I realized that my eyesight was going. And I went from the back row to about middle of the top tier to the front row of the next tier to right by that bar, and eventually I was sitting where you were. As back in the day, our instructors were spending all time writing in chalk on boards. That's how long ago I was in school. And so I have an advantage over you in that the element of discipline became mandatory for me. Since my junior year in college, I've taken 5 shots a day and tested my blood sugar 8 times a day for that 40 years. So that level of discipline, I would tell you, has kept me alive. Thank you. Thank you. But that is not something I would wish on anybody. But there is an element of discipline that was thrust upon me that I had a choice about how I would react to. And I make mistakes every day. But generally with the type 1 diabetes, I generally realize that in a jump ball, diabetes wins. So I give into it and go there. And one point about the discipline. So the choices that you can make are all about discipline and however you want to go. With your health, you guys all have numbers that you should be aware of, whether it's your cholesterol or BPI or wherever you are, BMI, and those. However you want to look at that, but discipline's one of the areas, health is one. The other area I'd ask you guys to think a little bit about is how creative are you? Now, I just want to modify this term a little bit, because when I use the term creative, people will say, well, is this like an art class? Like, you want to know how artistic I am? No, I'm not going there. I believe that we all have an ability to manifest the future. I believe, and I think I wouldn't get a lot of argument from you, that certain actions that you can take will increase the probability of a certain outcome. Actions we don't normally debate about, right? If I take certain actions, it increases probability of something happening. I, however, also believe that as part of my external creativity, what I say also increases the probability of an outcome. I also believe what I write increases the probability of an outcome. Those are the 3 forms of external creativity that I believe many people have an opportunity to be more thoughtful and mindful about. That's external creativity. Here's 2 internal creativity elements that I just happen to believe. I believe that internal creativity starts with how and what we think. How many of you are aware of your thought patterns? Can you find yourself repeating a thought pattern, and can you step back and be the observer of that thought pattern and say to yourself, is that thought pattern serving me well? Or am I a victim of what's happening because it's a habit? That's one element, I believe, of internal creativity. And the last one are feelings. How aware are you of how you feel and how that can manifest itself in how you feel and how you think and how you speak and how you write and how you act? So there's a lot of deep stuff here that I believe strongly in, but if you align those 5 elements, you are powerful. And that's a choice you guys can make. That's a habit that you guys can start to develop now. And I will tell you, if nothing else, owning those 5 elements of your creativity, whatever you choose, will make you more powerful.
And by that, you're not saying will make you the leader of a corporation, leader of an organization, president of this, president. No, more powerful in your life, whatever you choose to do.
Whatever you choose and whatever doors come open to you. Because, you know, without getting too philosophical, we can have a whole discussion about the circumstances that each of us were born into, right? And there are things that we can't change, right? There's some things, you know, if I want to be an NBA center, it's probably not going to happen no matter what I feel and what I think and what I speak and I write and I act, okay? That's just not going to happen. So for those of you, and maybe there are NBA centers out there, God bless you if that's your dream and that's where you want to go. But I think you always have got to understand that you were dealt a certain set of cards when you came in. Mm-hmm. Our opportunity is to play those cards the best way we can to open up the most opportunities and then choose from those opportunities.
Cool. Okay, listen. And now I'm gonna ask you a question that is in part going to be opinion, largely opinion, for you, right? And I recognize that. Nonetheless, I want to get your take on it. So, Rick the white man. I'm going to focus on the man side.
Okay.
Students are going to be reading this article about sexism in corporate America, in Silicon Valley in particular, so we've been hearing a lot about that. How much sexism is there in corporate America at the top, at the upper levels? What have you experienced? What have you seen?
Well, without being glib too much, right? So I'll use the opportunity to make another point, okay? I work with players. I work with players, people with titles, organizations that are global. And I thought I was doing a really good job emphasizing the criticality of diversity. Right? I always lead with a diverse management team, more diversity the better. But what I've done very recently is I've chosen, and by the way, at the time, I would use gender bias, and I would lop it in with diversity, right? We need to make progress in the area of diversity, and that includes gender bias. I now separate it. Because I think the gender diversity, the gender bias that's out there is so pervasive, it absolutely needs separate coverage, separate attention. It is currently, you have to go back, I guess, back to Anita Hill and the whole Clarence Thomas hearings before the last time it was as visible in the boardrooms as it is now. Everyone's very concerned. Am I going to be written up, blah, blah, blah. You know, President George H.W. Bush, who when he was in his wheelchair had to admit to kind of doing this once, and now he's in trouble. So everybody's looking in past, did anything ever happen? I get that. Yep. But it's such a serious topic, even as I do this, it's not a laughing matter, which is why I'm separating it.
Yeah.
So when I sit down with CEOs, when I sit down with senior leadership teams, we talk about what needs to happen for their company, right? Mm-hmm. And you know, running a big organization is not an easy thing, right? Yes, you have to have a customer strategy. Yes, you have to have a competitive strategy. You've got to have a strategy on costs. You've got to have a strategy on capital. You've got to have a strategy on culture. You have a strategy on the climate, right? A lot of C's. That's how I remember. I'm a simple guy. If it's all C's, that helps me, mnemonic device. But when you get to culture, right, diversity has always been at the top of the list. A change-adaptive culture, an organization that embraces change is what everybody wants. How do you get that?
Yeah.
Diverse opinions, right? Actively engaged diverse opinions has always been number one. But increasingly, we've got to deal with this issue of gender bias.
Yep.
Gender bias is pervasive and is stopping. By the way, there's wonderful research. The numbers, again, go to numbers. There are numbers that say that a gender-balanced leadership team outperforms a non-gender-balanced leadership team, right? There are numbers that say better shareholder return, right? All
So
the
it-
metrics are there.
so
So
it
you're not
matters.
going to get a businessman to listen to anecdotes. You get a businessman to talk about numbers. The numbers support the fact that this has got to be fixed.
Cool. So we will go there. Listen, Rick, we are out of time. Thank you very much. Hey, you could say something about voting and Michael Black.
Hey, by the way, 1 minute, one quickie. One of the reasons I'm in a state college, just 1 second, please. I'm in state college today to support a mayoral candidate. I didn't wear his sticker. I'm not going to tell you, you must vote for Michael Black. I'm just going to ask you all, please vote. Thank you.
All right.